I've seen any of you since the LCA show. You're all so talented, so brilliant. It was wonderful. Great to be back here in our state capitol. I'm joined by Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, also our Budget Director, Robert Mojica. We just concluded a very uplifting cabinet meeting. We have not had a chance to assemble in a few months, and so I wanted to bring everyone together and talk about how we will build on the successes that we just achieved through the budget process and with the conclusion of the legislative session. So we talked about some of the laws we signed most recently, our nation-leading gun package on Monday. We're signing the laws to protect reproductive rights in the state of New York, literally in a matter of days, and being prepared for whatever comes our way, whatever the Supreme Court does in the next couple of days, weeks, to show that New York State will continue to protect our rights, protect the safety of New Yorkers, and the health access for New Yorkers as well. So those decisions are top of mind. Our teams are already putting together ways that we're going to be able to respond. Did have a chance to recap some of our accomplishments, as I mentioned. We also heard from our new Lieutenant Governor, Antonio Delgado, who was able to verify my good judgment in selecting him and his connection with not just his district, but the people of the state of New York and his life's experiences that he's brought to this new position. And he's getting to know all the cabinet members and will work very closely with all of them. We also heard from our budget director about really what we're heading into, the difference in one year to the next, the headwinds that are coming our way with respect to the economy, the fact that we're looking at negative growth for a number of quarters. We don't know if there'll be a recession, but our job in New York is to be prepared for the worst. And so we talked about our budgeting this year in the context of the ability we had because of extraordinary money coming out of Washington tied to COVID relief, as well as Wall Street bonuses. We're doing very well last year, but we're seeing a different dynamic going forward. So we just wanted to calibrate where we are and just make sure that our commissioners understand what we're heading into. And again, our budgeting prepared for this. That's why we set aside reserves. We did not succumb to the pressure to spend all the surplus money. We needed to set it aside, and the wisdom of that is already being borne out already. So I also wanted to inspire the cabinet to go forth and to deal with the day-to-day challenges, try to lift up everyday New Yorkers as public servants, their responsibility, but also to not just manage today, but have an eye on tomorrow and what we're going to be doing in the months and years ahead to really have historians look back at this time and show how New York State was able to come through this pandemic stronger, healthier, more enlightened than ever before. So I'm real excited about it, and again, I'm so proud of having the most talented, diverse team ever assembled in state government, and we're continuing to show what leadership's all about. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have one. Speaking about the budget and money, there's a report from the state controller today that New York owes $1.8 billion to the unemployment insurance fund for the feds. It's not really new. He's bringing it up again, but businesses have been complaining that they shouldn't be the ones to have to pay for that. And so, wondering why the state isn't paying for that so that they don't have to.
All right, thank you for the question. Robert?
Yeah. I mean, the way the trust fund is set up, right, with the federal government is the employers pay in the first instance, and then they have to pay back any debt we have over time, right? Nothing new there has changed, right? The circumstance is such that these were probably tougher challenges than we've ever seen before, so the size of it is more significant. It will be stretched out over many years, and the amount of the increase, is not insignificant, but also it's something we're going to be monitoring as we go forward. To the extent there are revenues available to look at it, we'll look at it. In this year's budget, it was not addressed, but the increases had occurred last year already, so that actually goes forward. There's not an increase right now. Next increase would be in the following year. So we're looking at it, and we're similar to about a dozen other states.
Well, why not picking up the tab for businesses that are having their own struggles?
It's true. The state never has before, and that's where the trust fund is set up.
Governor, on the unemployment issue, during the pandemic, the unemployment system in the state was one of the biggest disasters of COVID. We had millions of people calling, trying to reach the Department of Labor. That never got through. We had people who had legitimate unemployment claims that never got their money or waited months to get their money. The legislative session is over, and we haven't heard anything from you about a review of the unemployment system, fixing these problems. We may be going into a recession where people need unemployment again, yet people still can't get through to the Department of Labor. So I want to hear from you, especially since you won't give me an interview with the commissioner and you didn't answer my questions that I sent, what you're going to do to fix the unemployment system in New York State.
We are fixing it every single day. More people than ever before are able to avail themselves of unemployment benefits. If you look back at what happened during the pandemic, it was a colossal, unprecedented flood of new calls and contact and people desperately trying to access money. The system was not set up to deal with that. We had to, at the time, prior to me becoming governor, had to ramp up a system that was under siege. And we knew that at the end of every call, there was a human being who needed help. We have been striving hard every single day since that time to better the services, and I'll be happy to get you information from Roberta Reardon, but our success rate, our connection rate, and our delivery of service rate is extraordinary compared to what it had been in the early months, but we'll continue to have the conversation about that.
When you do a review, you're doing a review of the nursing home situation.
I have asked them to improve the systems we had. I said, hire everybody you need to hire, bring in outside help. That is the changes, the transformation is ongoing, but we'll be happy to give you the numbers on what that looks like.
It's not
Governor,
working.
Governor, was there any discussion with agency leaders at this cabinet meeting regarding rising inflation costs and their effects on state agencies? And have you ordered agencies in recent weeks to conserve or otherwise cut costs in response to rising prices?
This is the good news of having such responsible budgeting, the process we just completed. We were able to tell our agencies today, we had a lift a hiring freeze that was in place. We told them that they still can continue to hire. We still have about 15,000 vacancies in state government. Continue, but as you prepare for next year, because we were able to fully fund everything that we targeted this year, but what we were very intentional about was not creating out-year gaps or creating a scenario where we couldn't afford to pay for what we committed to this year. So what we did was, yes, we talked about sort of moderating expectations, that this was a one-off year, again, because of the federal money from the pandemic relief, an extraordinary year when Wall Street was on fire. We know that that's not going to be the case, as well as unprecedented tax receipts from the bonuses that occurred but are not occurring now as we're monitoring this. So I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Robert, but we are very intentional in our conversation with them to say, that was this year, just be smart about this year. You're not going to, don't shoot for the stars financially, but make sure you deliver all the services and the programs that are transformative. What we did for this year are transformative, whether it's in education, healthcare, infrastructure, childcare, countless ways that we put in money in many areas that had been disinvested in or underinvested in for decades. So, Robert, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and the budget that the governor signed
Step up to the podium.
included.
I can't see you, I'm sorry. I can't see you with my camera. I apologize. Thank you.
In the budget that the governor enacted, we kept room in there. We recognized that inflationary pressures were coming. There's sufficient resources in the budget to deal with inflationary pressures on commodity prices. The governor also dealt with rising costs of wages, were also dealt with in the budget. So we believe the budget, as signed by the governor, can handle the inflationary pressures throughout the year.
You talked about two looming Supreme Court cases on abortion and on guns. At the end of the legislative session, you weren't able to get the constitutional amendment that you had sought on abortion. Do you think that that's going to dilute at all the strength of the laws that you've passed, and you're still going to try to fight for that? And then on the other piece, the concealed carry permit decision, what do you think legislature might do and come back and try to address that? Like, what are some of the specifics you might be able to change?
I'll take the second part of your question first. On concealed carry, we are working with our legal team, our policy team, as well as advocates, organizations like Everytown, drawing on people who've been studying our options for quite some time since this case was determined to be a case before the Supreme Court this year. So I'm not going to say now what we're going to do because I have to see what the rationale was for whatever decision they come down with. I need to see that first. I also have no intention of telegraphing a strategy to the Supreme Court that the state of New York may be considering, because I believe that that'll be counterproductive when the decision is ultimately issued. I need to be able to keep my cards close. But the second that decision comes down, because we've already done the groundwork, we'll be able to have an analysis done fairly quickly. I said within a day or so, we should have an idea of how we're going to respond. Is there executive action that can be taken? Is there a legislative solution? And I've already talked to the leaders about the possibility of, in cooperation with them, bringing back the legislature in an extraordinary session, that's what it's called, it is an extraordinary session, to find if there's a legislative solution, because this cannot be the situation in the state of New York where we just on Monday signed a comprehensive package designed to thwart violence from guns, to give us more authority, to just finally have some laws in place that will protect people from being slaughtered or killed every single day in our streets. To think that the Supreme Court could do something that undermines that is beyond disturbing, but we stand ready to take whatever steps are available to us legally to make sure that we can continue to protect New Yorkers. On the abortion issue, we already have enshrined in state law basically the protections of Roe v. Wade. It was called the Reproductive Health Act. So what it would take, we do want a constitutional amendment for that extra layer of protection. And the legislature, they had differences of opinions on language. I hope we can pull it together during this time they're out of session and to start next January with an approach that both the legislature, the Assembly, and the Senate can agree with. But until that time, women in the state of New York are absolutely protected. This is the law of the state. But I also caution, elections have consequences. Different leadership in this position or a change in our state legislature, which we don't predict, could also result in the undoing of that law. Not likely, but that is the extra protection that a constitutional amendment affords. But there is not that sense that we're not protected without it, but I want that extra layer of protection. And also the money we allocated through executive action from the Department of Health to allocate money to make sure that our providers are ready, that they can expand their services already for New York women and others who may be coming. They're already coming from other states like Ohio to Western New York as we speak. So, but we're very, very cognizant of the consequences of what the Supreme Court can and we expect will do, and we stand ready to act.
Governor, to clarify, you don't see first passage of a constitutional amendment until 2023, because that pushes off adoption 2 more years.
They didn't come to a resolution by the end of this session. That's the timetable we're dealing with.
And then a question for the Lieutenant Governor. The other day, you didn't attend a debate that was going on. I've heard from some Democratic clubs that you haven't been doing endorsement or screening processes, and your opponents are criticizing you of hiding, of not going out. With just a few weeks before the election, I'm wondering, what is your thinking about being out with voters, and why haven't you been kind of availing yourself of every single opportunity to meet people around the state?
Oh, I have. I've been out and about in every way, shape, and form, and excited to continue to do that. I was sworn in not very long ago, and have tried very, very hard in this new role to get my arms wrapped around this position. It's a massive state, a lot of communities to engage with, and whether it's in the upcoming debate that I'll be participating in on the 15th, or whether it's community forums, or whether it's handing out literature on street corners, or whether it's just engaging with clergy. I'm going to continue to do that work and make sure that I'm connected with folks every single day.
Lieutenant Governor, what is your official portfolio as Lieutenant Governor? Are you responsible for anything specific within the administration, like your predecessor was with NYCHA, for example?
So the governor and I have talked about, in conceptual terms, the fact that I can serve as a federal liaison, given the fact that I was able to secure a number of federal dollars directly, not just to the state, but to local governments of all population sizes. And with that, develop a portfolio of projects that speak to economic development, whether it's in the infrastructure space, wastewater management systems, broadband, housing. So still figuring out exactly how to target each of those different areas, but being able to leverage my expertise and experience utilizing federal dollars and getting those to the state and to local levels and figuring out how to maximize the value points for each of those projects is going to be a real focus of mine.
But no official portfolio as of now.
That project or that portfolio is certainly being flushed out as we speak.
On the subject of the extraordinary session,
Bill has the floor.
on the subject of the extraordinary session, some assembly members don't seem too enthused about coming back before June 28th. Are you open to forcing them back here, even if some of them grumble about having to come back to Albany a week before the primary?
We didn't say the date. We were waiting to see the date that Supreme Court comes out with. Then there is I didn't say that the legislature will be back the next couple days. I said that's when we work with the council and the legislative team from the Assembly, from the Senate, the executive team. We come up with an answer because this has to be an answer that'll withstand constitutional challenge. So we're going to get it right. So that didn't mean that we're going to rush to get them here. When they come back, it'll be an answer that we feel confident will be able to withstand future challenges, and that may or may not happen in that time frame. We didn't say the time frame, but all right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you coming in.
Overall, is there anything that the state government can do to alleviate the rising rents that we're seeing, especially in New York City, cost of groceries, things like that for individual New Yorkers?
We looked at our budget, we looked at our options. As soon as we started seeing inflation going up and the cost of gasoline going up, that is why we suspended the state share of the sales tax, not just as a token 1 month gesture as some states have done, like Florida. They're not even doing theirs till October. We said, let's give people relief for the long term until the end of this year. So that's some relief, not enormous, but it is something that we had control over, but also making sure that our rent relief money gets out. In addition to the money that was budgeted last year that was never out the door, we added another $800 million to the pot of money to help people who are behind in their rent. We added about $250 million for people behind their utilities. We've also, you talk about cost of living, we expanded the number of families by far that are eligible for child care subsidies. Again, this is money back in their pockets as more children are covered. So I am continuing to push our administration to find any way we can take steps to alleviate the crushing burden that our residents are living under right now. And we're going to continue to do so. Thank you, everybody.